Hey everybody, welcome to the History of FMW. This is going to be episode 13, probably the most historic episode that we're going to do up to this point. This is the first half of 1995, and this will lead up to the coverage of the Onita retirement show on May 5th of 1995. Before I get started, a couple quick plugs. You can always find Bahu, who is my co-host here. His websites are going to be bahufmw.com or fmwwrestling.us, where Bahu is going to be probably the only place that you're going to be able to get current DVDs of the current deathmatch companies like Freedoms, as well as most of the archives of FMW. And what other promotions do you have, Bahu?
Apache Army, WMF. I just recently started selling Big Japan as well as 01. So pretty much everything that had FMW wrestlers past and present. I'm then with them on shows. I sell DVDs of them.
Awesome. And you can find me online. I run a deathmatch newsletter that you can find at indiewrestlingintl.wordpress.com. And I actually just wrote up a little article on the history of light tubes in the deathmatch wrestling, which dates back to 1995 when Sabu used one in a cage match against Cactus Jack. So that was a big find for me. And if you're interested, you can go and read. I do updates about current American and Japanese deathmatch upcoming shows, results, and news, and all that stuff. So, moving on. Now, last episode, Bahu found a little bit of info about last episode in FMW. A lot of the wrestlers that were previously a part of Wing, they created a breakoff company, a breakoff group called the Wing Army. This would be Mr. Pogo, Matsunaga, Kinemura, and a few others. And I had the question: was there any legal battle between Mickey Ibaragi, who was the owner of the Wing intellectual property, and FMW over the the Wing logo, the Wing name, blah blah blah? So, Bahu, what did you find out about that?
Yeah, so what Mickey actually would threaten them to sue them, and hey, that's my my intellectual property. Wing is my name. You need to quit using it. And Onita would be like, okay, we'll stop using it. And then he'd keep using it, and then Mickey would go, "Hey, you need to quit using that. I'm going to sue you." Oh, okay, I'll quit using it. So they both were just pretty much lying to each other. He was never going to sue. He was never going to do anything about it. Mickey was never going to sue Onita or anything like that. And Onita kept telling him, "Sure, I'll stop it," and then never did. And so they just kind of were lying to each other, and it never ended up. Nothing ended up happening as a result.
Yeah, I compared it to, in America you would never have anything like this where WCW closes and then Ric Flair goes off and starts his own breakaway WCW group in some other company. It just would never happen. So I was curious about that. Okay, going on to 1995, we're going to start, FMW, they open with the dual Kurokan Hall shows on January 5th and 6th. On the 5th, it was headlined by Onita defeating Sambo Sako in a barbed wire death match. This wound up being Asako's retirement match. Where would you rank Asako's importance in FMW, and what happened to him after retiring?
This was this actually was a straight match between Onita and Asako, and it was actually really, really good because of the emotion. Onita was crying during the match and everything because he loved Asako. Asako was kind of the number 3 guy from the beginning of the promotion. He started it at the beginning, and it was always, Onita 1, Goto 2, Sambo 3. And so with Sambo retiring and everything, and we talked about a couple episodes ago where, Sambo even main evented again. It was a tournament, but it was the finals of a tournament with Onita versus Sambo in an exploding barbed wire death match in front of 30,000 people for that half concert, half wrestling show. So Sambo had a mark in FMW and everything. And around this time, his body was just starting to break down. Just the chair shots. He'd taken massive chair shots to the head throughout the years and just was always getting beaten really bad. And also he was suffering from diabetes. And so he had to just retire from wrestling. He ended up coming back a couple years later when Onita started his Onita promotion, Onita Pro, around 99, and he was a lot. He had had lost a lot of weight. He was just kind of doing comedy matches. He couldn't really do anything. Sadly, he after a couple years, he ended up due to the diabetes, he ended up losing a leg, and in 2004, he ended up passing away. So, and I mean, like I said, Onita loved him. Onita, after Sambo retired, or after Sambo passed away, Onita, held a show dedicated to him and everything like that. So, I mean, he never was the main guy, obviously, with Onita on top, but he was, one of the soldiers with FMW at the beginning.
Yeah, he was a guy who I never really, my FMW watching started around 1995, and so I never saw too much of him.
Yeah, he was kind of breaking down. He was kind of moving down the card also. Last episode we mentioned Ganosuke had got a win over him. So, they started putting the mid-carder guys over him, knowing, his career is almost over.
Yeah, too bad. So the next night on the 6th, they had an elimination money on the pole match that I believe was won by Kanemaru, correct?
Yeah, he grabbed the yen.
Yeah, so they have a bunch of money on a pole. There's different stories about how much it was. Dave reported it was $30,000 which would be probably 50,000 yen, something like that. And do you know when a company does these money on a pole matches, or they put the winner gets $100,000? Is this a shoot? Is it just for a gimmick, or do they maybe put up the money but then it's a bonus for the wrestlers?
Yeah, it's just a gimmick. It's to kind of show, like, hey, we won your money. We can now, because Wing was supposed to be a separate company in FMW, pretty much like invading them, trying to take them over and everything. And so when they win a match where they get, all this, thousands of dollars and everything, it's kind of like, hey, look, we have this money, to put forward towards our organization. But it's all a work. And after the match, you see the whole Wing group. They're celebrating. They're throwing the money in the air and everything. And Kanemaru, even his forehead was so cut up from the match, he ends up able to stick the one of the yen on his forehead completely. Just so it's just stuff like that trying to make something different. And also for a match like that, nobody has to do a job.
Also, at this time period, this is a minor FMW note, but I thought it was kind of interesting. The Great Sasuke began competing for New Japan, and he was scheduled to win the IWGP Junior title, but it was changed to him losing. Can you go into the story behind this?
Yeah, so he had a match with Ricky Fuji back on December 20th, 1994, and Ricky Fuji, it was for the FMW Independent Junior Heavyweight title. FMW, it was FMW's title, but they kind of were working with Michinoku Pro, and FMW wanted their title. They wanted to, use it for their, wrestlers, so they had Sasuke lose to Ricky Fuji. And as a result, with that loss being such fresh on the mind of New Japan, they didn't want Sasuke winning the IWA Junior title so soon after losing Ricky Fuji, because Ricky Fuji wasn't at the level of the New Japan Juniors at that time. So it was kind of just one of those, no, we don't want to look bad because you just lost to, an independent guy who's not that great.
This is going to be a topic that's going to come up a few more times because there's going to be a lot of inter-promotional stuff coming up. But is FMW still seen as the minor leagues?
It's not seen as a minor, but it's more of just they're not really respected by a lot of the, especially New Japan. A lot of New Japan wrestlers didn't really respect FMW wrestlers. They kind of saw them as garbage wrestlers, and they're just there. It's kind of like what WWF thought of as ECW. It's trash wrestlers and stuff like that. And I mean, even when Onita, who would have been who has such a high reputation and 25 years in the business at that time, Kensuke Sasaki still personally hated Onita for the style he wrestled and didn't respect him and everything. So it's just certain wrestlers had a mindset of that's just trashy wrestling, that they're not actually talented or any good or anything like that. So and they're still the number 3 promotion, even though at this time it's probably the peak of FMW, but they're still below All Japan and New Japan as far as total gross revenue.
Going on January 17th in Hanjo, they ran a show that was under the Wing banner, which, like we said with Mickey Ibaragi's doing, I'm sure that this was one of them because the show is listed as a Wing show. But the roster is basically it's basically an FMW show. Onita wrestles twice on it. What is the angle what is the angle behind this show?
Yeah, so this was a Wing show promoted as, the Wing wrestlers, and Wing fans came to the show. They were cheering for the Wing wrestlers that were usually heels and everything. It was kind of bringing in the old Wing fan base and everything. So, and what they did was they had Onita wrestle the first match to kind of embarrass him and be like, look, you're just an opening match wrestler. Onita never wrestled the opening match in FMW. So they had, they had the book. They decided the matches, so they booked Onita for the first match and only paid him $13 for the opening match, which again was a sign of disrespect. Like, you're only worth $13. And then, but in the main event, they didn't have Onita scheduled for the main event. But at the end, he ends up running in and before the match starts, and attacking the Wing guys, and takes the place of Gasaku Gashigawara, who was scheduled for the main event. So it ends up being Onita wrestling twice, so everyone can see Onita, fans can see Onita wrestle a legitimate main event type barbed wire match and everything. And then and the FMW team even wins the match, even, I think, it's kind of a FU to Wing there politically.
And was Onita the heel on this show?
Yeah, he didn't act like a heel. He still acted like a face, but the fans were booing him.
All right, cool. And so were there plans to do more of these Wing shows? Because as we see, Wing is going to come back in March. Were there plans of doing more of these, and did the actual Wing revival stunt that?
No, it was just something that they did, and I mean, it wasn't this huge sellout or anything like that. And again, it was more of the Wing fan base and everything instead of the FMW fan base. And it's something to try once, but the FMW fan base was a bigger fan base, and FMW was a current promotion going on, and Wing had at this time closed down for almost for about a year now. Mickey hadn't relaunched it yet or anything like that. So it's just something to try once and something to be different.
Okay. Going on January 21st, FMW, they drew about 4,600 fans in Sendai for another Pogo Onita match where Pogo won the Brass Knucks title again. At this point, the Brass Knucks title had really just been trading between Onita and Pogo back and forth. With Onita retiring, is there any sense in the company that they should be pushing the younger guys?
If they did, they couldn't say so. It's Onita's company. He's the number one guy, a mid-card guy who has, nowhere near the experience, nowhere near the fame, nowhere near, the drawing ability as Onita. And Onita's the booker and everything. So if there is frustration, it's silent and everything. And, and we'll get into it in future episodes, when Onita comes back and everything, that frustration, they're allowed to, vocalize it and everything as a result of, Onita's ego. But at this point, Onita's making them a lot of money, the company a lot of money. He's making his company a lot of money. They can't say anything now. Tarzan Goto, is probably the only one really, at the level that has, that will, could say something, but he's still going to get overruled. He's not, the owner of the company or anything like that. So, at this point, no, they're, nothing can really be said. And again, they're making so much money that they can't, and it's his retirement tour also. So, there's an ending in sight also. If, a wrestler feels like they're going to get pushed to the top, they know, hey, at least Onita is retiring in May. I'll have my chance then. But they know, until Onita retires, there's no way anyone's, gonna take his spot or anything like that in the meantime.
Okay. So also on the show, Pogo debuted the King Pogo gimmick. Is this based on any gimmick that he he did previously?
No, so what it was the Great Onita, Onita was doing the Great Onita gimmick and everything. So, with the Mood of Mist and whatnot, and he had defeated, Pogo and everything, and they had, done the gimmick a couple times and everything. So Pogo saw it as, okay, the Great Onita is kind of an upgrade to the the Great Nita gimmick is kind of an upgrade to Onita. So I'm going to counter and, do my own upgrade character. And so originally he thought of the Pogo the Great, and he's like, nah, I don't want to do that. And then he came up with the name King Pogo. And so he ends up using the King Pogo gimmick, where he's kind of, all he already had makeup and everything, but just kind of, he kind of changed up his gimmick and everything, and it was supposed to be, a counter to the upgrade. So it's kind of just, pretty much just countering to Onita's Great Nita gimmick, but it was nothing that he had wrestled under before, anything like that.
One quick note is one guy that we haven't heard from in a while is actually Horace Boulder. He did an appearance on January 16th for ECW at a show in Florida. We haven't heard from him in a while. What has he been up to since leaving FMW?
He's running his own promotion in Tampa at the time, and he actually was working with FMW to allow Hayabusa to work his shows and everything. And Mike Awesome was working the shows. Hayabusa would work the shows. So he's running his own Tampa independent promotion at this time.
Moving on to IWA, Cactus Jack came in for the tour in January. On January 8th, Terry Funk and Cactus Jack, they had a barbed wire match that would go on to be the Duel of the Wilds. This is the Cold Gym show that Foley wrote about in his book, which I think is probably the best Mick Foley Japanese death match, honestly. But how does Foley get over with the crowd?
Yeah, he gets over great. He's kind of being seen as the American Onita at this point, where he's willing to do crazy things, and he has kind of a reputation with WCW in the past and everything, and so he's getting over. I mean, he's becoming the number one guy in IWA Japan, and at this point, because he's able to what he's willing to do. I mean, it's what got him over in WWF 3 years later. He knows how to get over, and he knows how to destroy his body in the process, and in these type of matches, and he got himself over, and it was kind of the very first spark for the IWA Japan promotion.
Yeah, during the match, there's one really sick part where he goes over the top rope and he grabs the barbed wire. And he's going to do a spot, but then he kind of thinks worse of it, but he rips his hands apart. And you can see him look down at his hands, and they're just ripped to shreds. It's probably the best Mick Foley match from that era, I think. Some other names on the IWA tour that I've always been curious about are the Texas Hangmen.
That was Mean Mike and Tough Tom, the Disorderly Conduct from WCW. That's who they would become later on, but they were working in Puerto Rico, I believe with Victor Quinones at the time, and they were just brought in. But yeah, I mean, most people would know them as Disorderly Conduct in WCW, the Jobber Tag Team.
I always thought that one of them was Bull Payne, or were there two sets of them?
I was what I was able to find out, it was Disorderly Conduct.
Yeah, it was. I'm sure that it's a common gimmick that might get passed from person to person. But I was always curious about them.
Mm-hmm.
So going into February, Onita holds a press conference to announce he's not only going to retire from wrestling after the May 5th show, but he's going to be leaving FMW and relinquishing control of the company. How much of this is a shoot and how much of it is a work?
It's completely a shoot. He is going to be completely out of the picture, have nothing to do with FMW after he retires. He wants to do movies. He wants to move away from the wrestling at this time. He's he's burnt out also. He's banged up. He's taken all this all the horrible injuries, cuts, bruises, for the last 4 or 5 years, and he's kind of famous, and he sees this as he can move on and to bigger things and be in movies and everything, and he doesn't need wrestling anymore. So that's really kind of the main reason that he retired and everything, was he didn't feel he felt kind of burnt out, and it was time to move on to something better. But obviously it came, things didn't work out that way.
So why didn't, you kind of said so, but why didn't Onita stay on it in some type of office role or promotional role?
Well, like I mentioned a couple episodes ago, where he, he wanted FMW to close down. He saw it as, I'm FMW. I don't, I want this promotion to, I don't want this promotion going on without me. This is this is symbolized me. I don't want it to keep going. But his stepfather told him, no, you can't just, close the promotion down. Everyone's gonna lose jobs and everything, and then they're all gonna see you as, oh, you're the reason that, all these wrestlers, all this office management, lost their job, and they're all going to be upset at you. So Onita, realized, like, yeah, you know what I'll just sell it, make all this money off it, and then it's going to close down anyway without me, because FMW isn't going to be popular without me. And so it's going to close down, and everyone's going to go, yep, see, FMW couldn't work without Onita. So if he stayed on, there'd be kind of this pressure. First off, I don't know if he had the time really to continue at this point, or had the desire, but also he would still want the promotion to keep to succeed at this point if he was still working in an office role or anything like that.
What type of payout is going on? Like, are the people left, are they buying it from him?
Yeah, we can go into later in another episode, because I'm sure there'll be a topic, but everything. But yeah, so he ends up selling. Well, so pretty much his FMW, it changes into, it's two different promotions. His FMW is a completely different company than the FMW, that Hayabusa would run and everything like that. His FMW, he just makes dormant, because it's actually, even though it's making all this money and everything, it actually is a little bit, it's in debt, actually. Not that much, but it was technically in debt because he was paying himself so much and everything. And so, so it's a completely different company, but he sells everything to Arai, the titles, licensing, all this stuff. Arai spends all this money to get all the other stuff from FMW, and then creates his own company, which would become Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling.
All right, and you kind of just answered my question, which is who is going to take over for him in like the managerial roles?
Yeah, so he originally asked Hideki Takahashi, who was an office employee, to take the job, and Takahashi, who is probably best now known as the guy that started up Super Battle FMW a couple years ago, was running, up until about December or so. He was offered the position to, take over FMW, and then Takahashi turned it down. So Onita goes, okay, he goes over to Arai, who was the ring announcer and worked in the office and everything, goes, okay, Arai, if you don't take it, then no one's going to take it, and it's just going to close down. So I tried. And so Arai, who has no business sense or anything like that, has no, he's 30 years old, has no, idea how to run a company, goes, okay, I got to do it, because I want to keep my, I want to have a job. I want all my friends and, employees and all this, all the wrestlers to keep their jobs. So he felt the pressure. Okay, I got to do it. So he took over, he took over the reins of FMW. And when I was talking about him taking over a completely different company, so Onita's FMW was called it originally was called Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, but as the years went by, Onita changed the name just strictly to FMW. It wasn't an acronym anymore. It was just literally the letters FMW. When Arai created his own company, his new company, FMW, he brought back the Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling FMW acronym. So as kind of a callback to the original name of the promotion. So so Shoshi Arai ended up taking over FMW following Onita's retirement, and had to pay a lot of money from Onita to get all the like the belts and everything, and just all the licensing and stuff.
Just so many questions, but we're going to get there bit by bit. Now, the angle that is set up is that without Onita, Wing will take over the company, and Onita is trying to position Ganosuke and Niyama, the former Great Punk, to like step up and be the next young group that's going to lead the company. Why is Hayabusa not being mentioned in these angles?
Well, Hayabusa wasn't there, so that's the main reason. I mean, he's not, there to be like, if Onita's going, I want Hayabusa to step up. Well, he's still in Florida at this time, and everything. So, so they started pushing Ganosuke and Niyama, and it was also a way to get Tarzan Goto to turn heel because, Onita starts teaming up with Ganosuke and everything, and they win the tag title belts, and Goto's pretty upset over this. Like, wait, you won the title belts with my student, not me? And, what we talked about last episode where Goto turned heel, or sided with Hisagatsu Oya. Well, and then, was turned on and, sided with Onita again. Well, this is a way to turn Goto heel again.
On that note, what is Hayabusa doing the first half of 1995?
Yeah, so after we talked about last time, so he was, been wrestling in Mexico for a little over a year now, and he knows, his position is going to be one of the top FMW wrestlers, and he knows he needs to become a heavyweight, and he was at a junior heavyweight type, he's about 209 pounds or so. And so he knew, and he wasn't able to keep the weight in Mexico because of how sick he would get. So he went to Tampa, Florida in January 95. And Mike Awesome picked him up from the airport, and he just lived with Mike Awesome for the next couple months at Mike Awesome's house in Tampa. And they would train together because they knew, Onita's going to retire and we're going to be the two top guys, and they're, to kind of move forward, and they wanted to have great matches and everything. So they kind of trained together, they worked matches out and, at the gym and stuff like that. And, they would train together by eating, Hayabusa would try and gain as much weight as possible. He'd eat 15,000 calories a day. He would drink chocolate milk about 4 to 5 liters a day. Mike Awesome would kind of put on this, diet and everything. You got to eat a lot of meat. You got to eat a lot of pasta. And, they, like I said, they would just talk about how, they want their, they were going to have the top rivalry in the new FMW with Onita retiring, and they wanted to, have the best matches possible.
And they did. They had some awesome matches. Also, going on, so in IWA on February 3rd, they ran a show where Cactus Jack defeated Nakamaki, and during the match, Cactus Jack, he poured out thumbtacks. I'm always just curious, do you know if this is the first use of the thumbtack gimmick?
Yeah, it was the first use because I was looking this up, and it actually, so they list the next month in a tag match with with Cactus and against Nakamaki and Hiroshi Ono was the very first match that was listed as a thumbtacks death match. So this would have been the first match that Cactus Jack he used the thumbtacks in a match, and then the following month it was an actual stipulation to the match. But yeah, he came up with the idea of using thumbtacks. He was going around Japan buying all these thumbtacks and everything like that. Things though is when you pour thumbtacks, it's slippery and everything. So that's actually one of the reasons why a lot of wrestlers will do the barefoot thumbtack death matches, because it's actually easier to walk around because it's so hard to walk in thumbtacks with wrestling boots, even though obviously it's going to hurt a lot more when they pin up against your feet.
It's a tough world. I wouldn't want to be a part of it. Now, this is kind of a big question, I guess, but also on this show, the February 3rd IWA show, Miki Ibaragi appears. He appears with the Crypt Keeper, who was the final wing champion. They come out with the title. They have a scaffold match with Ono. I believe Ono wins it. And this is kind of to put the wing title back in people's minds, so when they relaunch it, there's people know who the champion is. They are working with IWA, and also Big Japan announces that they're also going to be working with IWA. What is the relationship like between the three companies?
Yeah, it's just working relationships and everything. They're all pretty much willing to work together. They're all small promotions. I mean, IWA Japan is probably, the much bigger promotion than the other two. But at this time, they're all just working together to just try and overdo FMW. FMW's right now the king, and, they kind of know that if all three of them work together, they'll gain more interest because they're competing against a giant right now, and so they're just doing whatever they can, and they all have good relationships with one another. Victor Quinones had worked with worked with Mickey Ibaragi and everything, so they're willing to work with each other for a short amount of time.
In that same vein, at this time, Mickey is trying to work up a relationship with Paul Heyman to bring in talent for the Wing launch in March, and Victor Quinones is trying to sweep under him and also get that relationship with ECCW. Victor had told some talent to no show some shows previously, so that's kind of not a good that's not very good friendship there. What is ECW's reputation like in Japan at this time?
It actually has a better reputation in Japan than the States because they're getting put in Pro Wrestling Weekly, which is the #1 magazine in Japan, and all the newsstands and everything. They would cover ECW as if it was a top promotion in America and everything. And this is early 1995. It was still just kind of a regional Philadelphia Northeast promotion. It hadn't really hit just starting to hit big around this time period. But Japan seeing all the a page and a half of pictures and of their shows, and so they don't know how small the promotion is. They're just seeing, it's WWE, there's WWE, there's WCW, and there's ECW. It's the #3 promotion and everything, even though probably early 95 most Americans didn't even know what ECW was at the time.
Yeah, I saw, Dave even listed that it was being shown on some type of satellite cable channel, which was, I think, very interesting because ECW was an angle-driven company, and I always wondered how you could translate that unless you were doing dub-overs or subtitles or something. The big news of the month, though, which we're going to talk about a couple more times, at least one more time when it happens, is that in April there's going to be a multi-company show at the Tokyo Dome. This is going to feature matches from pretty much every company in the country. It winds up being, I believe, 13 or 14 companies participate in this.
Yeah, every country, every promotion besides War, pretty much.
Yeah. If you want to just walk us through this, what was the background behind this? Who was in charge and all of that?
It was Pro Wrestling Weekly. They put it together. Like I said, they were the #1 magazine, and it's a big deal. It's in every newsstand, and if you've been to Tokyo, you go into a 7-Eleven, which they're all over the place, and they have Pro Wrestling Weekly still to this day. I mean, at this time it was a competition because there was Pro Wrestling Weekly and Pro Wrestling Gong, but yeah, so they worked. They came up with a plan of having the biggest show. At this time, this is probably the height of the Japanese wrestling bubble. Is 1995. The first half and everything. All the companies are doing the best numbers pretty much that they're ever going to do even, and the magazine company sees, hey, we can make a lot of money off this if we just get all the promotions to get together and work one match show and everything, and there's gonna be big politics on who goes last and everything and what kind of matches where and everything, and like I said, the War was the only company that didn't really they weren't on the show just simply because they had such a strong relationship with Pro Wrestling Gong, the second magazine company, because they Tenryu had a relationship with the editors and everything that kind of pushed them to look like a bigger company than they were. So every other promotion, though, All Japan, New Japan, FMW, even the small independent promotions, they all got they all kind of got a representative match to show the 60,000 fans what their promotion was like, to possibly gain new interest and everything as well.
When it comes to the payoffs for this, how did they do the payoffs? Like for a smaller company, there were a couple really small companies. Was the payoff from it like one of the biggest payoffs that they would get that year?
I don't know. I don't know how the payoffs were. I mean, I'm sure though. It was based off order of the the matches. So the All Japan and the New Japan guys got the number one payday. The All Japan guys got number two. I would imagine just if you just look at the card, that's how much they were paid. Now I don't know if the small independent promotions, or LLPW or anything like that. What exactly they got, but I would imagine hey, they're working the Tokyo Dome, they're going to get a percentage of the gate, and I'm sure it's more than what they were getting on a house show or anything like that.
Yeah. I would love it if they could do this, like if WWE allowed some companies to work Mania or something as like pre-show matches. But anyway, so going on to March, the big news is that Tarzan Goto and Oya were scheduled for a war show. This was a show that was going to be a benefit show for the victims of an earthquake, and they were pulled at the last minute to work an FMW show instead. This turned into a he said, she said thing where Onita makes a statement, hey, I'm no longer in charge of the company, don't blame me, I don't know why. Why were Goto and Oya pulled?
Well, Onita was still the owner. I've never heard about Onita not being the president, but he definitely was still the owner at this time. Now, the reason that he was pulled though is because the sponsor of the show, they had someone putting money down for the show to they wanted Tarzan Goto and Hisagatsu Oya on the show, and Onita's his loyalty is to his sponsor, to FMW, over war. So they ended up having to back out of the show. Pull them from the show and work the show because again the sponsor means more than the relationship with Tenryu.
What does this do to the relationship between War and FMW and also Onita and Tenryu?
Well, and like I mentioned, they already had a shaky past and everything because Onita had short-sighted or, given Tenryu not the exact payday that he was promised for the Kawasaki match. So there was already kind of rumblings in the relationship. But at this point, Onita doesn't care. He's retiring soon. It completely ended the relationship with FMW and War. But like I said, Onita's retiring in a couple months. He wasn't going to work War, and Tenryu wasn't going to work any FMW anyway. So it didn't really matter to Onita at this point. And they ended up making up, and they worked together in 1999. 4 years later. So it didn't really do anything long term for it didn't really affect Onita in any way.
Yeah, and this story is going to come up in a big way in a couple more months. One new face that's going to be in IWA in March is Iceman. Who was Iceman?
There's Ricky Santana. He was a former, he was a Puerto Rican wrestler that had worked CMLL or EMLL, and he worked WCW and just kind of job matches. He worked some WWF job matches. So, he wasn't anything of a name value or anything.
Yeah, he for anyone who didn't see it, he comes out in a full body outfit that's like stripes. It looks kind of goofy, to be honest. But speaking of him, he was in the main event of the launch of the Big Japan Company on March 16th. He teamed with Ron Powers, losing to Nakamaki and Nagasaki in a barbed wire match. They ran a couple shows in March, usually in front of crowds like 500, 600, 700 people. How would you rank the launch of the company?
Not much. There really wasn't that much of it to it. It just kind of looked like another version of Now, which obviously didn't really make it. And the work rate is horrible. They're trying a different low rent death match type style that we just the fans have just seen with Now. It's a shock if you look now. Hey, Big Japan's a legitimate, very good company. 20 plus years later, but at this time, it didn't look like it was going to last. It didn't look like it was going to be, lasting 2 years based off the roster, based off the work rate, based off the low rent death matches.
Now they're ranked. They're one of the top promotions. This is really the golden age of Big Japan at the moment. I'm really loving the company. I've been a Big Japan mark since 1997, so I love talking about them. Anyway, going on to Wing. Wing relaunched on March 26, and the cards are they're like half the cards feature ECW matches. The main event is actually the Pitbulls against the Public Enemy. What is business like out to start for Wing?
Not good. If you look at the shows, it's they're pretty empty arenas. These shows do not do well at all. They bring in the ECW guys because, again, like, hey, these fans, do know, the ECW wrestlers, again, probably better than a lot of the American fans at this point. But, it's still not something where, oh, I'm going to buy a ticket to see a guy that, hey, yeah, I've seen him in the back of the magazine a couple times. But, it's still not something that, that's drawing the fans, especially, that's the main draw, even because the rosters were so weak, because pretty much the only former wing guy, it's not even really wing at this point, because the only former wing guy that they really have is Jason the Terrible working the shows and everything. So the roster was weak, and I mean, the company didn't make it very long based off how poor the shows were. Also, I wanted to make mention that Wally Yamaguchi was working this promotion as well. He was one of the magazine editors as well, and obviously one of the guys that started FMW with Mickey Ibaragi and Onita, and they pulled away to start Wing. But Wally Yamaguchi was the referee for a lot of these matches as well.
Okay. Now there's one note that I'm curious about. So when I was going over the cards of FMW in March, they were doing big business. Almost every show is sold out. And the average attendance is well over 3,000 per show. I mean, this has to be one of their best tours yet. But there's one show in Seiyo City on March 26th that only has about 750 fans listed. Is there any specific story behind this show?
Seiyo City is a very small town. It's only has about 16,000 people total. So the fact that they're able to get almost 1,000 fans was a pretty good sign, considering how small the town was and everything. And it pretty much was, it was the sponsor. A sponsor wanted to run there, and so they were getting paid already to run the show and everything in this small town. But like I said, so it was just based off it was just a small town compared to all the other cities that they were running.
And this was actually the show that Oya and Goto got pulled to work instead of the war show. April 2nd saw the multi-promotion Tokyo Dome show. It's probably one of the single most famous events in Japanese wrestling sling history. Like we said earlier, it's like 13 or 14 companies. They each have a match. Going over one by one, what is FMW's involvement with the show?
So they set up a match where it's going to be the Great Nita versus King Pogo in an exploding barbed wire death match. Now, the issue with that, and they're going to be third from the top, but the issue with that is they don't have time to set up the barbed wire and everything like that and then take it down and everything if it's not going to be the last match. So what they do is they set up another ring on one side of the Tokyo Dome, and it's just going to specifically be used for the Onita Pogo match and everything. So, but the issue with that is only a certain amount of fans can actually see the match. Most of the fans, the front row seats, all that, they can't really see the match. So that hurt the match itself. But, and we'll go over it in a second, but yeah, it didn't really get over compared to other matches.
And what about the involvement of IWA?
Yeah, so they actually had a great match. They totally won up to FMW on this show. It was this wild, crazy match with Terry Funk, Cactus Jack, the Headhunters, Nakamaki. Terry Funk does a moonsault off the top turnbuckle, and you see the 400-pound Headhunters doing a moonsault and everything like that. And this is a crazy match. And Terry Funk tries to start a fire and everything during the match, and he can't get the fire going, and he ends up just giving up on it and everything. But so the fire marshal tell the promoters, the Pro Wrestling Weekly promoters of the show, hey, if that fire had been set, we were gonna shut this show down. Just letting you know. Well, by that point, that was earlier in the show. Well, by that point, Onita and Pogo still had their match, and so they are told specifically, you cannot have a fire in the match, and that's one of Pogo's big things at this time is blowing a fireball at Onita. So that also kind of hampered, took away from the match as well, something they had planned based off IWA Japan, trying to do it first. So IWA Japan got over, it looked like, the better promotion, whereas, and another thing about the Onita matches, they didn't really get over very well as well. Like, this wasn't the FMW fan base that showed up. It's the New Japan, it was the All Japan, fan base and everything, but the FMW fan base didn't really show up. So when Onita, came out, he's used to, the crowd going crazy and everything, all the FMW fans, loving him. And he got kind of a timid response and everything. And the match, like I said, was on the other side of the building. So the match didn't get very much heat. And ironically enough, we've talked about him at the beginning of it, when we first started talking about this, Ryuma Go, who, he had started Pioneer Sensei, in the late 80s and everything. He was actually one of the most over guys on the show as a comedy gimmick and everything, with his promotion, doing the space aliens and everything like that at the time. So he actually was more over than Onita on this show, which was an all-star show.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that type of a topic as it goes on, but so coming out of the show, what is the reaction of the fans and the press for the death matches versus the other matches?
Yeah, it wasn't very well received. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, and it wasn't a good match either. That is also the fact, Onita and Pogo don't, they're not the best workers in the world, but, they have their style of match, and it wasn't even the best style of match that, wasn't even their best match or anything. They had better matches. And again, there was limitation. There wasn't that much heat, they're just, kind of, doing their style of match, and it wasn't as good. And, so just kind of everything wrong happened on the show for them.
I know the answer to this question, but I just want to ask you, most of the other companies, most all of their companies, their match was a 6-man tag match, so they could get all of their stars on there. And this was one of the only singles matches. Do you think that they would have benefited from having, some type of 6-man match inside the normal ring?
It would have probably been better in the sense of, the match itself and the heat, and it'd be in the middle of the of the Tokyo Dome instead of the side. But I think they wanted to show, FMW wanted to show, hey, look, we're different, because IWA Japan just had a street fight and everything earlier on the show. So then FMW would have countered with another street fight. So FMW wanted to kind of show, look, we're different than, these promotions. Look what we're willing to do. We have exploding barbed wire, and everything. So that, was probably one of the key decisions on why, they chose the type of match they chose.
All right, cool. Going on, at this time, New Japan announced that Terry Funk is going to come in for the, I don't know how to say this, Heisei Ishingun, I'm guessing. This is the kind of... Yeah, this is like the kind of split promotion that we mentioned on the previous episode. And he's going to work a show on May 17th, and in exchange, New Japan is going to help IWA with the upcoming Kawasaki Dream King of the Deathmatch tournament that would be held in August. Did New Japan have to deal with IWA to get Funk?
I've never seen anything that New Japan gave IWA Japan or a talent exchange or anything. But what a lot of the times what they do, wrestlers will do is, just because they're contracted with the company, if they get permission, they for a better deal or something like that, they can work another company and everything like that with the permission. Now IWA Japan and New Japan are not rivals or by any means, and IWA Japan's not going to risk losing Terry Funk, over a deal, you're working for New Japan. As long as he's not working for FMW and he's making, he's going to make more money, working New Japan. As long as he doesn't miss his dates or anything like that, then, it's fine. But like I said, as far as a working relationship, maybe they had talked about it at the beginning, but I didn't, New Japan didn't work, sending wrestlers to IWA Japan.
Yeah, the initial rumor that Dave said was that Hashimoto would come in for the IWA show, but obviously no talent worked the show. So hopefully next episode we'll have a little bit more info if that went anywhere or if it was just kind of a rumor. Sometime in April, Onita started hosting a drive time radio talk show. Do you know anything about this?
No, I don't. I mean, I know it was I read that was in Yokohama, but I don't know any details or anything like that as far as him when he started or when he stopped or anything like that. But I would imagine it wasn't a daily show. I would imagine it'd be like, one of those like weekly, I mean, now it would be a podcast pretty much, probably like a weekly thing. But I would imagine that, it just was a short time period.
We always see that Onita gets these segments on TV and hosting shows. Why don't they ever last long?
Well, it's a mix of, like I said, Onita's pretty busy at this point because he's touring and everything like that. But he also kind of has ADD on his interests. He moves around and stuff. Oh, I want to do this. I want to go back into wrestling. I want to try politics. I want to try acting. I want to, do this. He's very ADD when it comes to just his, what he's interested in. And, sometimes like, okay, I tried it and I'm not a fan. And, but he did do TV for a while, like different spots and everything, appearing on shows and whatnot to try and, gain more popularity, to a mainstream audience. But, as far as the radio show, I'm sure, it didn't last long based off of, okay, it's this commitment that I'm not willing to make long term.
All right. And now we get into a long story. So FMW, they announced the lineup for the Onita retirement match, and he's going to be facing Tarzan Goto in an explosion match. That's going to be like the largest bombs ever, is basically the gimmick of it. However, on April 21st, Tarzan Goto, Ganosuke, and Onita Jr., who would take on the name Flying Kid Ichihara, they no-show a Kuroken Hall show on April 21st, and 2 days later, the trio hold a press conference announcing that they are officially quitting FMW. Why would they quit at this time?
Okay, so there's different speculation, and I even asked Ganosuke the other day if he, it's been 23 years almost, could you give the information on why you got, Tarzan Goto, Mr. Ganosuke, and Ichihara left? And he stated to me, I cannot tell. I promised. I swore I would not tell until I was dead. And that's the same thing Tarzan Goto has said as well. So they're never going to tell the real reason why. And they're the only three people that know. And Onita didn't know. Shoshi Arai doesn't know. So Hayabusa didn't even know. Now there's the speculation, which is number one, which is what most people assume was Tarzan Goto was going to lose this match. He was going to set up, he was going to lose to Onita again, the third time a big match where he loses, and he's going to be, expected to be one of the top guys in FMW afterwards, after losing to Onita again. And so that's going to be a bad look and whatnot. So that's the main hypothesis pretty much on why he left. Number two, this is Onita's speculation that he came up with the gimmick when he wanted Tarzan Goto to turn heel in 1995 to set up this match. He wanted Tarzan Goto because he had turned, face, heel. He wanted Tarzan Goto to be evil and hated by the fans. And so he came up with the gimmick of Tarzan Goto becoming a member of the cult, the Aum Shinryu, which was a cult going on in 1995. They were a terrorist group actually, and they had attacked Tokyo subways around this time period, and people killed people and everything. He suggested Tarzan Goto, come up with this gimmick. Have a gimmick where he's, one of the members. So, it's Onita against the evil terrorist. And Goto was irate.
This is insane. I'm sorry, Brett. That is absolutely an insane idea for a gimmick. I can't believe that.
Oh, no. He came up with that gimmick, and Goto was irate. And, that kind of tore the relationship right there. And so that's why Onita feels that Goto decided to quit. Now, again, Onita was leaving, so I don't know, if that's the exact reason why, because Onita was going to leave anyway. Now, there's also this fact that the wrestlers did not like Tarzan Goto. And he was kind of, the second in command. He was the one, you guys got to get on the bus. Oh, you're late. I'm fining you. Or, he was the trainer also. And sometimes you pissed him off, he punched you in the face and everything. And so a lot of the wrestlers really didn't like Tarzan Goto. And, Onita was kind of the one protecting him. So there's that aspect of, okay, Onita's going to be gone. He's not going to have that protection. It's all the other wrestlers that kind of hate him and everything, or don't like him. I talked to Ricky Fuji years ago about this, and, Ricky Fuji was like, hey, there's a reason that Tarzan Goto never came back to FMW, and it's because we didn't want him back. So there was, he was not liked. So all these three are kind of the main, speculation. Again, the number one would be, he didn't want to do a job in Kawasaki again. But I mean, again, there's all these different reasons, but no one will actually ever know the official reason because they're swore to secrecy that they're never going to tell.
So first of all, wow, that Onita would come up with this. I mean, that's honestly worse than the Bruiser Brody angle that they were running back in the day. I mean, it would literally be like, assuming that a wrestler is a member of ISIS. Like, that is just insane. And and also, just for fans to know, in the Japanese world, kayfabe is very much still alive. Like, when you're talking to a wrestler at a show, they'll talk to you about their matches and their moves and their music and their training and all that stuff. But if you bring up, like, their family or money, they totally just shut down and they turn their back on you. Like, kayfabe is very much alive. So these are stories that may never get told. Now, also at this press conference, Goto, he goes into the fiasco that happened with War, back that we had talked about back in March. Do you have any info, and do you want to go over that?
I mean, it pretty much was Tarzan Goto was just doing what he was told. He was still an employee with FMW, and Onita said, no, you're going to work the FMW show instead. So Goto had to do what he, was told. And so, he was pretty upset about that. And I mean, again, at this point, the Onita and Goto relationship, was really on rocky terms. And, they didn't talk to each other for about, they didn't really, talk to each other for about 6 years or so until Tarzan Goto started working for Onita again and Onita Pro, and which was a big deal at the time. So their relationship at this point, and they came in together, Goto working for Onita and everything, and being the number 2 guy and stuff. And it was at this point, it was just, they're not friends at this point.
Now, were the 3 wrestlers, were they unified as a group? I mean, were they committed to staying together as a group?
Yeah, they stayed together the entire time, pretty much until Ganosuke and Ichihara wanted to go back to FMW. And like I said, Goto wasn't welcomed back and everything. So, but at this point, they worked all the promotions together. So they were, they were loyal to one another for about 2 years.
And one more question about the subject. Was there any fear of more no-shows or people leaving?
No, there wasn't a fear of no-shows or people leaving, but the issue also was kind of, there's going to be, Onita's not going to be in charge anymore, and everybody kind of knew Onita's the number 1 guy. Now with Hayabusa, and they're kind of being this, fight to be the number 1 guy, wrestling and politics and egos and everything, there's going to be issues. And I mean, one wrestler did quit just simply because Hayabusa was put on top instead of him. And, things like that happen. But I mean, there wasn't any fear of, more wrestlers are going to leave. I mean, it was pretty much, if you were going to leave, you were going to leave with Tarzan Goto.
All right. And we're going to talk about this a little more. I mean, from here, the timeline gets so crammed. Like, so much happens over the next 2 weeks here. Seeing as how Hayabusa would take on the role of the ace of the company, what is he doing right now at this point? I know that you had wrote that he had other job offers as well.
Well, no, that was previous when he got offered the deal with IWA Japan, but also yeah, okay, yeah. So when he was in Florida, he was working, and WWF wanted a Japanese wrestler for them at the time, and they wanted him to try out. So they liked his look and everything. You know, he ended up using it later on, tried to use it as the Shinobi gimmick later on, but they liked the look and everything. So they go, you know, hey, you want to try out for a match? You know, try out for a job here. And he kind of was like, oh, that, you know, that is a dream job. He, you know, he grew up watching WWF, you know, as a kid and everything. And but you know, he was loyal to FMW, and hey, he was also about to get the #1 spot, you know, that he knew, you know, when he started the company he wanted to get. So he decided to stay with FMW. You know, he didn't even take the you know, the dark match tryout or anything like that, and the position of Japanese wrestler ended up going to Jinsei Shinzaki like a month or so later. So yeah, so he ended up working, you know, but at this point, you know, he's just working in Florida and everything, about to go to Japan.
What match was he listed as having on the May 5th show?
Yeah, he was gonna take on the Gladiator. It was going to be one of these, like, look what the new FMW is going to be. It's going to be, you know, this great match. And, you know, like I mentioned, you know, they were training together and everything to have this great match and whatnot, to show, like, hey, this is the new FMW. This is what's you're going to see and everything. But obviously, you know, things changed with Tarzan Goto leaving.
Now, so with Goto gone, Onita needs an opponent, and they've only got about 10 days to find one. So there's all of this like news and speculation about who it's going to be. The first name that comes to mind is obviously Pogo. Pogo makes a statement that he says he doesn't want the spot, and frankly, he was annoyed that he wasn't the first choice. Was Pogo's comments, were those real, or was that part of an angle to build up the future possible opponents?
No, that was real. He didn't want the spot. You know, he wasn't, you know, he'd been working with Onita for the last, you know, almost 2 years at this point, nonstop. And, you know, and hey, wait, I don't get this, you know, spot with Onita, you know, and I wasn't the first one, you know, I don't want it anymore. So it was a shoot, though. He didn't want to have, you know, to be, you know, the second choice, you know, the replacement.
We've seen Onita have a falling out with, you know, Tenryu, Funk, now Goto. What is his relationship like with Pogo?
At this point, it's good. I mean, they're working together pretty much. They're making money together. You know, it's a successful tandem and everything. And you know, they were close until the end. And we'll go into it later. But you know, Onita, you know, he wanted to retire with Pogo even, and he kind of wanted Pogo to retire with him, but Pogo refused. And as we get later on, you know, Onita ends up making Pogo do something he doesn't want to do later. You know, when Onita comes back. But yeah, I mean, they're, you know, I'm sure there's differences and whatnot, but you know, they're a lot stronger than, you know, Tarzan Goto and Onita are at this point.
I think one of the things is, you know, Pogo, through all of, you know, through doing these shows, Pogo is the one guy that Onita appears to have no problem losing to. I'm sure that that also helps.
And Pogo's a nice guy, you know. Yeah. Pogo's a nice guy also. Like, that's the one thing people don't really, you know, he's a bad worker. He doesn't do very much. He's a nice guy, though. I mean, everyone I've talked to love him. You know, he lets, you know, wrestlers live with him, stay with him. You know, I know people that, you know, just were wrestling fans, and he speaks English, and he used to have a shop. He used to have a restaurant and everything. If you went over there and saw him, you know, he'd just sit there and talk with you and everything. So, I mean, he's a really nice guy. So, you know, I mean, he doesn't have the ego, or he didn't have the ego that a lot of the wrestlers that Onita was dealing with, like a Tenryu or even a Goto.
Yeah. The other possible opponent that is floated in and winds up being the front runner is a wrestler named Takashi Ishikawa. Who was he? And you know, the timeline here is so crammed, so it's you know, I don't want to jump too far ahead. But who was he? And was he a serious contender, or was he simply the guy to set up the angle?
Yeah, he was the guy to set up the angle. Yeah, he was the guy who set up the angle. He was he started up in All Japan, and then he had left with Tenryu to join SWS in 1990, and then he worked War and New Japan, and at this point he had started up his own promotion, Tokyo Pro, and so, but I mean, he still was known as a mid card wrestler and everything, but yeah, it was simply just. I mean, his words were kind of like, oh, this is a great opportunity for me in Tokyo Pro to, for the, for such a spotlight match and everything, but it was never going to happen.
So, as we know, Hayabusa is going to take the spot soon, but sometime during the time when Goto and them left, Ganosuke tried to call Hayabusa, who had just returned to Tokyo, but Hayabusa missed that call. If you want to go over it, like what is the story behind this, and like what can we assume from it?
Okay, yeah. So he comes in, he flies in around the time period right before that Ganosuke and Goto left FMW. He flies in to stay at a hotel for the next couple days and everything while FMW is on tour. Well, he doesn't even know that FMW, that Ganosuke and Goto no-show Corrigan Hall. And he has been in Mexico pretty much, in the U.S. for, a good part of a year and a half. Well, he's had a girlfriend, ever since 1992. And he, and he hasn't seen her since, since pretty much the time in August when he went by for, to take on Sabu. So it had been 8 months. So he wanted to have relationships with her. He wanted to, have sex with her and everything. And so he is staying in a hotel, or actually, so he's staying in a hotel, and he goes over to her house to spend the night with her and everything. And Ganosuke is calling his hotel room, going, "Hey, I'm about to quit FMW. I'm about to quit FMW." And he wants to talk to his friend, and Hayabusa's not in the hotel room, and so Ganosuke can't get a hold of him, and he's like, "You know what? I quit." And he wasn't pissed, but it was kind of like, oh, dumbass type thing, where it was just kind of like you could have, Hayabusa could have possibly talked him out of it type thing, but it wasn't meant to be. And so yeah, and then Hayabusa comes back to the hotel, gets the voicemail, and finds out, whoops, Ganosuke's already quit.
Yeah, if this was a movie, this would be one scene of like the camera zooming in on the phone ringing and no one picks it up. So on April 30th, they do the press conference where Ishikawa is going to sign the contract to face Onita, but Hayabusa appears. And if you can go over, what does Hayabusa say and what does he do?
Yeah, so he comes up and he wants to challenge Onita for the match. He gets down on his knees and is begging for the match. And Onita starts screaming at him, going, you don't know what it's like to be a deathmatch wrestler. You're just, they don't teach you this style in Mexico and everything. And you don't have the fight and everything. And again, we go back to Onita's not the biggest fan of Hayabusa. He was, when he fired Hayabusa as his young boy early on and stuff. So Onita's never really been the biggest fan of Hayabusa, but it was kind of a joint decision okay, I'll, Goto's gone. I'll work with Hayabusa to set up the new FMW and everything, based off Shoshi Arai, wanting it and everything. So Hayabusa, makes the request and, challenge, and Onita saying no. And then Takashi Ishikawa, stands up and goes, what he said, I want him to have the match. He has the heart to have this, he should have the match instead. And so Ishikawa walks away, and Onita is all pissed off and everything, and starts screaming at Hayabusa, but he accepts the match for May 5th.
Now, if Onita wasn't a fan of his, who are the ones talking Onita into taking the match, or was it his idea? Like, did Onita have to fight did Hayabusa have to fight for the spot, basically?
No. So what happened was, when Hayabusa was at the hotel and everything, and he got Go Ito, the referee and the booker, he came into the hotel and he told Hayabusa, I just want to let you know, Goto and all of them have quit. You're going to have the match against Onita. Now you're obviously going to lose. So I just want to let you know that, but but we want you, you're going to be the guy. We want you to have the spotlight and everything. So Hayabusa didn't even know it. It was just, hey, you're going to do this. And, so he didn't have to fight for it or anything like that. But I'm sure, Shoshi Arai, with him having the new FMW and everything, he got, kind of the say of, hey, I want Hayabusa to have the match. So Onita went with it.
I believe I don't know if you had wrote it or where I read it, but I read that initially they didn't want him to do the gimmick. They wanted him to simply be Eiji Zaki. Is that true?
No, what happened was, so when he came back from the airport, he took a taxi. Shoshi Arai picked him up, and he took they were taking a taxi to the hotel, and Hayabusa goes, because the plan always was he was going to return back as Eiji Zaki, because that's what FMW fans knew him as. But since he had, and we talked about it a couple episodes ago, where he wore the Hayabusa mask for the Super J Cup in case the match was a bomb and a failure, he could come back as himself instead of Hayabusa. So it wasn't like, oh, here's this bomb. He had this horrible match with Liger coming back. But since it was such a success, he decided he'd been working Mexico, he'd been working Lucha Libre, everything. He'd been Hayabusa for a year and a half. He goes, I think I should keep the Hayabusa gimmick going. And Arai goes, I agree. So it was just kind of Hayabusa's suggestion, and Arai thought that it was a better decision, because at this point they had fans kind of did know based off the Super J Cup or his match against Sabu, hey, Hayabusa was a top wrestler, whereas Eiji Zaki, when he left, he was still a preliminary young boy.
Mixed up in all this drama, at the end of April, the IWU company folded. We mentioned them once or twice in the past. Is there any notes to say about them folding up?
Not really. They most of the wrestlers ended up going to Tokyo Pro, which was another kind of low rent deathmatch promotion. They had Sabu and Abdullah the Butcher, and whatnot. But yeah, as far as IWU, it was just one of those like now and everything where it just really never caught on, and it just kind of some of the wrestlers ended up making a name for themselves and whatnot, but the promotion itself, it was not a success.
Okay, moving on to May. Actually staying in April. I'm sorry. There's just so much going on. It's insane. I would love to see a movie of this. So the Goto Trio, they debuted at an IWA show on April 27th. They would start an angle with the company that would lead to their wrestling debut in Osaka on May 8th, which we'll talk about on the next show. Tenryu enters this story as he offers to assist IWA and the trio going forward. What is this triangle relationship between the Goto Trio, IWA, and also War, basically?
So Goto's group is a freelance group, pretty much, and they're going to work. The IWA president Asano offered Goto a lot of money and a lot of control after he left FMW, so Goto went with it. But Tenryu also wanted Goto, there was no hard feelings with Goto. Tenryu's feelings was with Onita. Tenryu wanted Goto to work his Sumo Hall show coming up in July. So, Goto's kind of a hot act right now where, he's the number 2 guy that spurned FMW and everything. And so, he's never going to be, the top guy or whatnot. IWA Japan kind of tried to push him as the top guy, but War, he was still a draw and a name and everything. And so pretty much, like I said, War wanted him for a show, and IWA Japan wanted him, as like their top guy up against, Cactus Jack and Terry Funk and everything.
Okay. The last note before we go on to the big show is on May 4th, Onita defeated Pogo for the Brass Knuckles Championship. So Onita actually went into the match as the Brass Knuckles champion. So that's just the last FMW note before we get into it. So May 5th comes.
Pogo was the Brass Knuckles. Pogo was the champion, and Onita won it the day before retiring.
Yeah. The ego on Onita has to be just through the roof. So May 5th comes. It's the Onita retirement show. I'll let you just go. I mean, this was, I actually just watched this show 2 days ago, getting prepped for this. So, Bahu, tell us about May 5th, 1995, Kawasaki Stadium.
Yeah, so it was the biggest FMW show of all time. It had the biggest match of all time. It drew 58,250 fans. A lot of those fans actually it were standing outside. There was a video. There was a TV showing the show outside Kawasaki Stadium. So you could buy a ticket to stand outside and watch the show from right outside Kawasaki Stadium because the whole stadium was sold out. Dave reports that it drew about 2.5 million, which that seems accurate. The only thing was Shoshi Arai said that number was never released. So I don't know if Dave got super secret information there right after the show. But so Arai says that that the show was never, like, that information was never released because Onita ended up taking all the, Onita ended up taking in $300,000 for the show and everything. So he pretty much took the whole gate. So it was big a show and whatnot, but Onita took so much money from the show that it wasn't like any wrestler made, it wasn't like a WrestleMania payday for these wrestlers. It was a WrestleMania main event payday for Onita, and the other wrestlers just got, kind of, pretty much the percentage that they're usually getting and whatnot. So anyway, so that was, as far as the gate and everything, but it's sold out. It's jam-packed. Everybody, this is the accumulation of a year of Onita's retirement and everything. For the main event, we had Mr. Pogo and Yukihiro Kanemaru. They were the tag team champions, and they ended up going up against Hisagatsu Oya and Riki Fuji, which were a part of the Lethal Weapon group, which that's what Tarzan Goto had started when he turned heel. He started the Lethal Weapon group with Oya and Riki Fuji. Well, he left, so now it was just Oya and Riki. They were challenging for the tag titles, and Pogo ends up accidentally hitting Kanemaru during the match, and which leads to Oya getting a back suplex and pinning Kanemaru, which Pogo's a heel, pisses him off that Kanemaru lost, even though Pogo was the reason that, he ended up taking the fall. So Pogo blows a fireball at Kanemaru and has officially left the Wing group. And he ends up joining with the Lethal Weapon. Him and Mike Awesome and whatnot end up joining the Lethal Weapon group. So that ends up leading to, the new FMW and whatnot. So then we have the main event of the show, Onita and Hayabusa, and it's a great atmosphere. It's dark, and they have the cage and everything, the 15-minute explosion. Hayabusa is super nervous about this because he's just been training for the last year or so, all his high flying moves, learning all these high flying things to separate himself, and he can't do them. There's not even any ropes or anything like that. So he ends up, he has the match with Onita. It's kind of a slow start and whatnot, and then Hayabusa goes into the exploding cage. He gets cut up really bad. Onita, gets his arm cut up really bad with the explosion. Hayabusa ends up suffering 67 stitches, and a bunch of the scars that you see all over his body, during his matches, a lot of them were from this match and everything. Hayabusa, came up with the idea of, I can't do any high flying moves or anything like that, but I'm going to, show myself to this crowd what I can do. And he, he ends up getting on top of the cage and moonsaulting, but missing. And like I said, this is a 15-minute explosion, so the ring is already exploded and there's dust everywhere. And Hayabusa's going for one last-ditch effort, and he, goes to the top of the cage and moonsaults and misses, and that leads to Onita hitting the Thunderfire powerbomb and finishing Hayabusa off. Onita wins. A lot of people have always talked about, should Hayabusa have won and everything like that. But, as I mentioned, it was never an option. Onita was always going to win no matter what. It was, he probably had to have some convincing that Hayabusa even be in the match, let alone him putting over Hayabusa. So Onita wins. He gets to have his, moment and everything. He even starts, he even kind of talks down to Hayabusa and everything in his post match, going, "You weren't enough. You weren't enough for me. You didn't have it," and everything. But there's belief that just Onita was just talking at this point. He didn't even know what he was saying. It was just kind of going with what he was saying. Hayabusa has to be stretchered off before he's sent to the hospital. He's crying. He's doing an emotional interview. People are chanting Ezuki as he's stretchered off. People still think Hayabusa, think of Hayabusa as Ejiazaki and whatnot at this point. But he did show, he showed, what he had, and he did earn, he showed what he was capable of. He showed a lot of, talent in the match, and he came off looking really good. And and we'll talk about it next episode, but even though the gate didn't really show it based off Hayabusa being at top, he gained a lot of media attention right away, and a big reason was because of how well he performed in this match and what he was willing to do and everything. And so like I said, Hayabusa ends up going to the hospital for burns, stitches. He had 67 stitches, and his body is, and in just 12 days, he's going to start up a new tour. So he is learning what it's like to be the ace right away. And as I said, we'll go into the next episode. His body is already banged up, and it's just going to get worse.
We will stop there. It really is. If anybody hasn't seen the match, I think most people have probably. This is probably the most famous match in the history of the company that everybody sees. It winds up on the most compilation tapes and everything like that. But you don't have to name dates and all. But what does Onita immediately leave? Like, that's it. He is done. And what does he plan on doing for the next couple years?
Yeah, he's done. He is no longer with the company. It's going to be Shoshi Arai running the company. Hayabusa's working actually in the office and everything. Goito's the matchmaker. There's the office staff, but Onita is completely, they move offices even, from Onita's office. They get their own office and everything. It is a completely different company without Onita. Onita is going to be a movie star in his mind. He had already done a couple movies, and, he had a lot of, TV shows and media attention and stuff, and he felt that he was going to be, one of the top Japanese movie stars because he had the charisma and he already had a name and everything, but it didn't really work out.
All right. So like I said, we're going to stop there. Do you have any other thoughts or notes about this time period?
It's my favorite time period, actually. It's the start of the new FMW, and again, we'll probably go into it more next episode. But they realize, hey, we can't just be a deathmatch company anymore. We're gonna have to, have great matches and everything. And I don't know, just the atmosphere of the first year and a half, especially that first 6 months. It's great. The Mike Awesome feud and everything like that. Hayabusa having to prove himself, starting from the bottom. I talked to Ricky Fuji about this last year. His favorite, and Ricky Fuji was there from the beginning to the end. His favorite time period as well was right after Onita retired of his career. It was, seeing the fans, barely anybody show up because, hey, this is, what's this company? It's without Onita. What FMW without Onita? No thanks. To, drawing great houses and everything based off great matches. And, and honestly, I think most people would, a lot of people agree, because you hear more about these matches talked about than you hear about the Onita matches even. The Onita matches I mostly hear about these days are not even the FMW matches. If, you don't hear, Kawasaki matches and whatnot, or maybe the Pogo matches, but usually you hear about, New Japan or, things like that. They weren't that memorable. They weren't great matches. They were great theater, but they weren't great matches. But these were great matches. So it's a completely 180 that FMW does here in the next couple weeks, even right after the retirement show.
My only comment that I want to make is that one thing that Dave, most of this info comes from somewhere between you and Dave is where most of it comes from, and the little details are definitely coming from Dave. And Dave said that for years, ever since 1990, when FMW really started just blowing up, and there was this third company that was drawing thousands and thousands of people, he said, it's not the FMW or the matches that are drawing it, it's Onita. Onita could do anything and he would draw. He is the rock star carrying the company. And, obviously attendance really went down, even though the match quality improved greatly. I think he might be right in that. Dave called Onita the greatest single drawing guy since Hogan. And I think he's probably right in that. That one guy, the FMW cards, there's not a lot of stars. The matches are good, not great. Some are downright awful. But as long as Onita is in the main event against Leon Spinks or, anybody, it's going to, he's drawing 40, 50, 58,000 people. And then throughout the year, they're still drawing 6,000, 12,000 people. And Onita was an absolute rock star. And I don't know if there's ever been one individual that can draw cards like the way Onita did since then.
And he's right. And I mean, Onita was, and I always make the comparison with Onita and Hayabusa to Hogan and Bret Hart, where it's a completely different WWF under the two in such a short period. But, Hulk Hogan was, he drew, he got all the fans and everything. But, there's that, that kind of that smart audience and whatever. They, think more highly of the Bret Hart era, which obviously didn't draw as well, but there were better matches and everything. And so that's kind of the comparison where, Bret Hart was never going to be Hulk Hogan. He could never draw like Hulk Hogan. He had to be something completely different. And that's what Hayabusa had to do. Hayabusa was never going to draw like Onita. He wasn't put in the position to, draw. I mean, he couldn't be Onita. He had to be something completely different. And yeah, to be as big of a draw Onita is, something that it was almost impossible to be, especially based off Onita's, the company that most people know Onita for, or FMW for is Onita. So it was, but he had to do something different. And so it's a completely, different era. And it's, again, it doesn't draw anywhere close to what Onita does, neither, but it provides, better matches and, a different atmosphere as well.
I would say that for our show goes, I would think, from a television point of view, this would be the end of season 1. From here on out, Onita's gone, so we're going to go on to all new things. It's going to be really exciting, new talent, new matches, new gimmicks, new everything. So with that, I think we can wrap it up. One last plug, Bahu, we didn't talk about it before. Where can people find you on Twitter and such?
Bahu FMW on Twitter. On Instagram, I post about 15, 17 pictures every 4 or 5 days or so on Bahu FMW World, just random pictures. I have thousands of magazines over the years and everything, and I just randomly will just go through magazines and find the best pictures. And I also have a YouTube page, Brett FMW, where every couple months I'll make a career music video or of an FMW wrestler, or I'll, if I find something random on FMW, I'll post it on there.
Yeah, and your YouTube, the videos on there, if anybody wants to see, like, if you want to know what has Onita done for 10 years, watch his videos. They're like 20-something minutes long, and it's everything they do. They're awesome. You can find me on Twitter at INTL Wrestling. I just try to catalog the history of all of this, the history of the gimmicks, the history of wrestlers, the history of the companies. I love doing this. I first got my first tape when I was like 13, and I've never grown up since. So, all right, well, thank you very much. Come back for episode 14, where we will cover the second half of 1995, and this will be the Hayabusa era for quite a while until Koto Fuki comes in, which we'll get into that. So, all right, I'll see you guys later.